Saturday night, Perth, Islam Makhachev, number 2 pound for pound in most people's eyes. I had him 3, but it's semantics. Who the hell cares? Very rare to get 1 versus 2 or 1 versus 3. Leon 2. Versus number 1 in everyone's eyes, Alex the Great Volkanovski in Australia. Volkanovski finally gets a chance as a champion to fight in his home country. Sold out. Australian fans, by all accounts, on fire. Super psyched to back their guy. There are 10 Australians on the card. The first time the UFC was in Australia back in 2010, UFC 110, headlined by Cain Velasquez versus Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. There were just 2 Australians on the card. George Soteropoulos and Anthony Perosh, who took a fight against Mirko Krokop on like a week's notice. The scene has grown tremendously. And one of their own was at the top of the bill, going for gold at 55, try to make history, just the 5th double champ in UFC history. And it was an incredible scene and an incredible fight. Off the bat, you see the size difference. You see them jockeying. And then the last 90 or so seconds of the first round, you're like, oh my God, he's got his back. The scary monster, Islam Makhachev, has his back. Volk cannot be more calm, cannot be more collected. Ends the round going like this, talking smack, smiling, laughing. What? How is this possible? This is the smaller guy fending off the monster who everyone is afraid of. Second round, some dicey moments there. Looks like he rocks him. He gets rocked. Volk I'm talking about. Back to the grappling. Back and forth they go. That's one of the hotly debated rounds. Third round, Alex Volkanovski, dominant, clear cut, wins the round. Well, except for one of the judges who didn't give him the round, but most people, I think, gave the third round to Volk. Fourth round, to me, is the most fascinating one. Grappling heavy, dominance by Makhachev on the ground, but in terms of damage, minimal at best. Volk is going like this. He's calling him all kinds of names. He's laughing at him. He's just, being active, punching, doing whatever he can. If you look at the stats, and I know they don't always tell the story, Volk's doing some serious work there in terms of damage, which is the number one criteria, right? I mean, that's what we've been told. Damage is number 1. And then number 5 is the easiest round of them all to score. Never seen Makhachev in a position like that. Obviously, he has the one loss to Adriano Martins, and that was more of a flash thing, but this was, Volk beating him up in his guard, raining down blows, ground and pound, all that stuff. Wild. And I think a lot of people at the time thought that Volk had done enough. The crowd went nuts. Now, for the record, upon watching it live, I scored it 3-2 for Islam Makhachev. I gave Islam the first, second, and fourth rounds. I gave Volk the third and fifth. Now, I watched it again last night, and yes, the second and fourth are really close. Super close. I saw what Volk tweeted. He says that he thinks he won the second, third, and fifth. I think the fourth, he actually may have a stronger case, to be honest. But super, super close. And then when you look at the rest of those 2 weight classes, which they are affecting at the top of, all right, 45, do you do Yair versus the winner of Holloway and Arnold Allen? You have Beneil Dariush and Charles Oliveira most likely fighting on May 6th. So what happens there? That's in, 3 months? So the timing doesn't really work out. They could fight and then be ready to fight again in August. Do you squeeze one in? So that is wild. Do you run it back? I don't know. Volk upset. Was a professional, was a mensch afterwards. But clearly upset. Felt like he was robbed of a moment. Islam, I thought afterwards was fine as well. Felt like he was trying to convince us too much that he was the best. Like he was saying it. Just let other people say it. Let other people crown you. Let other people say that you're the man. Now you got all this debate. Is he really number 1? Did Volk's performance keep him at number 1 because he was the smaller guy and it was oh so close? And then, of course, we wake up this morning to a series of tweets from Dan Hooker, not even beating around the bush, just flatly accusing Islam Makhachev of cheating before the fight. And what is he saying? I think we have the tweets right here, right? We got them. This is the first one at 2:59 a.m., which is about 4 p.m. in Perth. Dan Hooker tweets, dumb expletive, thinks he can fly to Australia, hire a nurse to give him an IV, and we won't find out, cheating dog, follows that up with Dan Hooker posting a screen grab of, a Google search about how long is the suspension for IV use, which, by the way, as he's pointing out here, could be up to 2 years, and you would presume, fine, stripping of the belt. He writes, USADA doing fuck all. Follows that up with, prove me wrong, bet you can't. Follows that up with, he doesn't cheat, he doesn't win. And then follows that up with a person asking him about 5 hours ago, Dan, who are you talking about? It's early East Coast USA, so it's hard to find out. And he then says Islam is a cheat. So, I mean, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot, which would maybe even lead to more talk, want, desire to see the rematch. I got to bring in the guys here to talk about all of this because my mind is actually spinning because there's so much to discuss. There's so many layers to all of this. So let's bring in New York Rick and GC. I just laid out, guys, my scorecard. So just for the record, I think that's the most important thing to lay out here because that's been the most hotly debated thing. I mean, I've seen a lot of people, including the great Lil Wayne, say that he feels like Volk was cheated. New York Rick, your scorecard on Saturday night?
Yeah. If you were watching the watch party, shout out to everybody that did. The lot of you that did. Tremendous content.
Tremendous.
GC and Mike Heck. We scored it in real time. I had it exactly the same as you. I had 1, 2, and 4 for Islam, and I had 3 and 5 for Volk.
And GC, you agree with that, right?
Exact same way. Yeah, that's how I saw it live, and after rewatching it, that's what I think.
What's going on with the light situation behind you there, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah.
Valentine's Day.
Oh.
I didn't want to come in with the glasses.
Oh,
It feels like
yeah.
we're on a serious subject,
but
hotly debated, but,
Mind the glasses, if I'm being honest.
I like it. I say bring them back.
I don't mind the glasses. You got a Vogue shirt there too? Is that legit?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is from Engage. This is from, our
Have you
good
ever
friend
worn
Ash.
that?
I wore it on Saturday, so I didn't wear it.
I saw you wearing
during
Jack
the
Della.
fight. Yeah, I was wearing Jack Della. I didn't want to wear it for the fight,
You were afraid?
Superstitious.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a little bit afraid. I put it on afterward, though, incredibly impressive performance. So, yeah, got to rep him, bro.
Well, that's a nice one. That does not
it's a
look
great
like
one.
a
I see it on a
knockoff.
lot of people. This is definitely not a knockoff. This is Engage, ID. That's the real stuff. They got a sick one with the rings that I might buy, too.
Have either of you had a chance to rewatch the fight, or at least the 2 rounds in question? Because really it comes down to the second or the fourth. Anyone have a chance to do that? Not trying to call you out.
I have
Yeah.
not rewatched.
Yeah.
I watched round 2 again.
After watching it again and seeing the hullabaloo, do you have any part of you feel like, all right, maybe he did deserve to win, that this was...
All right. So here's the thing.
Yes.
When I was watching it live, watching it with Rick on the watch party, there was no question in my mind going to the scorecards. I was like, yeah, this is going to be 48-47 Makhachev. I feel like this one was pretty clear. And Rick kept saying, maybe round 2 was closer than people thought, and some of the judges gave it to them. After rewatching it, I see more now people saying how close it was and how contested it was. I could see how a judge would give them that, despite none of the judges giving him
Sure.
that too.
And of course, the judges don't have the luxury of doing that, right? Like they're watching in real time.
Yeah, of course
from
not.
a corner. So it's like we're trying to look for things. And the fact that the majority of us, I think, and we're not, professional judges, it was a pretty good group. Like there's no Douglas Crosby in that group right there. The fact that the majority of them, of the judges, the fan, everyone's going 48-47. There's the 49-46 that's out there, which is a little bit weird, but ultimately giving it to Islam.
I'll be honest. I think a 49-46 is fine too. Those rounds were, except for 4 and 5, the first 3, I think you can maneuver. 3, although 3 was interesting, but yeah, I think there's leeway that you can find a 49-46 in there. But I think prevailing wisdom is 48-47 either direction. But the rounds were so close. This is the problem with this system, these conversations, is a close fight is not represented by the scorecards properly in this sport. That's just the reality of the situation. We're talking about razor thin rounds that could go either way, and the person is on the wrong side of it, and it's just 10-9, and now we move on. It's whereas somebody can beat the living hell out of somebody like Volk did at the end of the 5th round, and it's 10-9 again. So it's not being properly represented by the scorecards, in my opinion. But I don't think I will say I don't think 49-46 is outlandish.
Okay, yeah. On the whole, if you're going round by round, and I'm happy that you say that for 2 reasons. Number one, worth noting for the OG fans, if this was a pride fight, Volk is winning that fight, right? Meaning how you end the night is most important, right?
Well,
just like how you would score a street fight, right? Like the person that walks away looking better wins the night.
Cumulative damage, Volk would have won that fight. Yes.
Oh my God, the side-by-side picture of them at their post-fight interviews.
The other thing, you bring up a great point, Nurkic, you can't look at the total stats of a fight and be like, look at the difference. Because again, all you got to do is win 3 out of 5. And so if there's one round that is, lopsided, all of a sudden you look at the total stats and be like, how did this guy lose? That's not how fights are scored. It's just 3 out of 5. If you do enough, 3 out of the 5, you're walking away, even if you lay 2 eggs in 2 of the rounds. So you can't do that. Now, if you want to go round by round and look at the stats and say like, 4th round, he actually landed way more than this guy and this guy didn't really threaten and all that. Now we've got an interesting conversation on our hands. But I think we can all agree on this. That was incredible. That may have even been better than we all thought.
Exceeded my expectations by
edge of the seat stuff. Like I couldn't look away. I could not look away.
Yep.
The chess match, the size difference, him fending off the takedowns, how cool he was, laughing, talking shit, the striking, never seeing Islam in a position like he was in the 5th round, thinking if there's a minute left here, is he actually going to finish him? I mean, everything about it. It was amazing. It was
Islam
the best.
turning the tables in round 4 and going to the takedowns that we were waiting for in the first 3 rounds.
And what a takedown.
And the timing on the level change,
beautiful.
Having him in danger. This fight had every bit of two of the best. If you don't think the 2 best, 2 of the best fighters on the planet duking it out. I loved it. I loved it.
So we agree on that. Do we also agree? And I'll ask you this, GC. Amazingly, the guy who everyone was kind of indifferent about, the guy who they said didn't have the dynamic personality. He's not Izzy. He's not, he's not edgy. He's not a shit talker. He's not this. It feels like Volk could do no wrong. Like, I know he wanted the history. I know he doesn't necessarily care about that, but he has come into his own as a personality, as a character. Even the way he was like soaking in the walkout and the buffer intros and afterwards, it feels like he has never been more popular, never been more respected, never been more appreciated. That's the weird silver lining. If we were to look at this as if it was the stock market, it does feel like everyone's loving and high on Volk, and Islam kind of either stayed here, and again, I scored the fight for him, or even went there because it felt like he wasn't as, as scary, as dangerous as people were making him out to be going in, right?
I mean, it could be like, it could just be my timeline, but it feels like Islam actually has gone down a notch. It feels like people are trying to discredit him because this one going to the scorecards, because a lot of people thought that Volk won the fight. And to the point of Volk, like, how could he ever get any higher than this? Like, I mean, other than winning the fight itself, it almost feels like because he lost, more people are on his side because they think that he should have won.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the performance from Volk, just like you can't ask for much more from him other than if he was able to get that finish in the last 60 seconds. It's unbelievable. So yeah, I would say that Volk has skyrocketed. It always felt like Max Holloway has been the favorite featherweight for the entire time that, I've been a fan of late. And now it feels like Volk is starting, to maybe eclipse that. Like he is just...
It was Herculean.
A beloved child right now.
Because he looked like the underdog. He looked smaller. Everyone was so afraid of Islam. And I'm trying to think. I know there's an example or two, perhaps Nurkic, you can remember, where someone loses, but it actually feels like his stock is higher than the guy who won. If in fact you thought Islam won the fight, right? Like one of those weird situations where it's like, man, we counted this guy out. What did he end up as? Like a plus 300 or something like that?
Yeah, plus 300 in like the second round. He was like plus 550 on the live line. Like it was really.
And there's nothing I would rather do more than sit here and say I scored it for him. And sit here and like, oh, that clip that you guys were passing around about me saying to Sky Nicholson that he's going to win, and then what I said, or like I was picking him to win. Yeah. There's nothing I'd rather do more than to say I called it, but I can't. That's the kind of guy that I am. I can't do that. I can't do that.
Yeah, I was cheering for Volk as hard as anyone could be cheering for him, and like Yeah, when it went to the scorecards, it would have surprised me. I would have been elated, but it would have surprised me had he gotten his hand raised.
I mean, the stakes are different, but obviously I think Jared Gordon in a losing effort kind of helped his stock versus Paddy Pimblett.
Well,
I think there's a few recently, but not to this magnitude,
Right.
because of everything that was on the line. Can I just say one thing, though?
Maybe Johnny Hendricks GSP.
I mean, you would have to go back because,
Yeah.
again, the level that we're talking about is just completely different.
Not to the magnitude.
Gus Jones. Go ahead.
Not to the magnitude, but the Khamzat Burns fight, I feel like a lot of people loved Burns after that because it was such a banger. And I felt like because you saw the chink in Khamzat's armor, like it felt like, he is mortal, that like he took a step back. Obviously, not to the level of this. This is a totally different level.
I just want to say one thing.
Tell me.
I hate that this has become a zero-sum game. I really do.
What does that mean?
It is possible to be true. And I would argue that this is my position. It is possible to be true that Islam can be as good as we thought he was, and Volk can be as good as we thought he was. It doesn't have to be a situation where, because Volk was more competitive in the fight, all of a sudden Islam isn't as great as we thought. No, he can be as great as we thought, and Volk can be as great as we thought. I hate that it's become this kind of like tribalistic, this guy versus this guy. One has to have stock up, one has to have stock down. And you see it. It's just, you can't avoid it on Twitter. If you put out a position, you're automatically hating, right? If you say somebody did well, then that they assume that means that the other person did poorly. And that's just not the case. This was two of the best fighters in the world competing at the highest level and both rising to the occasion. Islam getting it done, Volk not, in my opinion, the way I scored it. And I just hate that it has to be this way, but that is the nature of social media. That is the nature of the environment we live in. And it's just, it's sad. It's truly sad because I think what we saw on Saturday night deserves better and was special.
Dude, I'm 100% with you, Rick. I mean, I said something nice. Oh, man, we have a technical, lights falling on. I said something nice about Islam, just about, the fact that he went into Australia. That's his first title defense is beating Alexander Volkanovski. Like, people are trying to dumb it down to like, oh, he beat a featherweight. Like, it was Alexander Volkanovski, the greatest featherweight on earth right now, and like he won and beat him, and then everyone, is like, oh,
why do you hate Volk?
Deserve it. Why do you hate Volk? He shouldn't even have won in the first place. It's just like, you can respect both the fighters and the fight itself. You don't have to choose a side here.
It's ridiculous. I even had people saying like I'm biased towards Islam. I'm biased. I was like, on the timeline, I had people saying I'm biased towards Islam, and then I have people saying I hate Russians, and then I have people saying I'm biased towards. I'm like, I don't even know what to. I guess that means you're doing it right. I heard Joe Buck say it one time that like when the Niners play the Cowboys, he gets it from both sides. And that means he's doing it right because, And
I think people see selective things. Like if they only see one tweet of you, backing up one fighter, then they think that's where you stand. Like it's.
I don't want to give them an out. I think it's BS, and I think that we need to do better. I don't want to say that that's doing it right. I think people need to change their attitudes.
Who knows? We'll never win that. But the point is, everyone's talking about it. Everyone's going nuts. And so there are two great follow-up questions following all of this. Number one, let's go with the immediate question. The immediate question is, who is the best pound-for-pound fighter on the world right now? If this was truly 1 versus 2, and I seem to be on an island that it was 1 versus 3, but you know what?
Yep, I agree with that. You are
but you know what? Due to the
logic,
recency bias, meaning, all right, he's the more active guy as of now. The next guy, is going to fight in a month. I'll bump up one of them to 2 for now. Let's just, for the sake of this, say 1 versus 2. I'll go to Mr. New York Rick first because I saw one of your tweets gain a lot of traction.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you have as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter going into this fight, and who do you have as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter going out of this fight?
Yeah, I had Alexander Volkanovski, and I still have Alexander Volkanovski.
Frank.
Yes, sir. Come on. Volk, for sure.
No. Breaking news.
I would like to hear the answer, your answer to this question.
No. I need him to finish. But I just wanted Frank breaking news. This is a big deal.
I've got to go on a little bit of a run.
Oh, I want it.
Yes.
Give it to me.
So I had Alexander Volkanovski. I still have Alexander Volkanovski, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
I am interpreting pound for pound differently than I think a lot of people interpret pound for pound. I would dare say that I'm sticking to the spirit and the origin of what this is actually supposed to mean, but I also acknowledge that it has become corrupted over time to kind of fit whatever narrative the person who's using that list wants it to be. The origination of pound for pound, the spirit of pound for pound, is to equalize people across weight classes. To say if everybody was similar size, removing physical attributes, who is the more skilled fighter. That is the original intention of pound for pound. It started in boxing. Heavyweight champion was always the baddest man on the planet. They wanted a way to celebrate people who were smaller, not necessarily in the glamour division, knocking everybody out, and say that they were just as skilled as the biggest and baddest fighters on the planet. This was the origination of it. For me, that fight left me feeling two things. One, Islam Makhachev is as good as I think people believed he was. Defensively, even though he got hit the most in any fight that he's had,
Crazy stat.
he's still an insanely good defensive fighter. He's still an insanely good positional grappler. His striking, I think, is better than a lot of people would give him credit for. And I think he's every bit as good as advertised. I also left thinking, though, Alexander Volkanovski coming up a weight class, not a true lightweight, and I don't think anybody would disagree with the idea that Islam is the bigger and more physically imposing fighter. Coming up a weight class, performing as well as he did, to me, showed me that if things were equal, I think that Alexander Volkanovski would win that fight and is the more skilled fighter. It's razor close. If anybody has Islam as their number one, I don't have a problem with it. And I'll actually go so far as to say, if anybody had Kamaru Usman as their number one, I don't really have a problem with it because
Post-Leon loss?
Post-Leon loss, sticking to the logic of this, and I will continue to say this, head-to-head matchup is not the only thing to determine who is the more skilled fighter. Losing to Leon Edwards matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. I would have Kamaru Usman ahead of Leon Edwards. I would have Alexander Volkanovski ahead of Islam Makhachev. Am I saying that this is the only answer and it's definitive? Not by any means. But in the spirit of what pound for pound is supposed to mean, it is not simply a resume comparison. I will say we don't often get head-to-head matchups, which is why this was so unique. But that is the spirit of it. And I truly believe that Alexander Volkanovski is the most skilled, well-rounded fighter on the planet if given the fantasy option of making everybody the same size. And it's in the name. Pound for pound is in the name. It can't just be a resume conversation. That is not what this is. It's not just who has the best wins recently. That's just not what this is. It has become that for certain people, and they will argue that to the death, but that's just not what it is. And I choose not to fall into that. I believe that Alexander Volkanovski is number one. That's where I stand.
GC?
Ariel, your number one pound for pound?
No, I'm asking you first. It's my show. Who'd you have going in? Who'd you have going out?
I had Alexander Volkanovski. I had Islam as 2 going into it. Now, I guess I was a little bit confused. I guess I wasn't sure on what I thought pound for pound meant. But I mean, what
it's really
Rick
whatever the hell you want it to be.
Exactly.
That's
It's
the
like
point.
it seems like it's everybody's own interpretation, but it feels like the correct definition should be what Rick is saying. Like if you made the people the exact same size, exact same reach, exact same weight, everything, and you're just going off the skills of the fighter, who would win the fight? And after Saturday, I can't believe that it's not Alexander Volkanovski. But then my brain gets put in a pretzel because it was the number 1 versus the number 2, and the number 2 beat the number 1. How does he not become number 1 in this instance? If you're going by the resume, if you're going by what some people, the most recent wins, it has to be Islam. It's inarguable. But if you're going by what Rick just explained, what it really should be, it's in the name. I will keep Alexander Volkanovski as number 1, and I'll go with the name, pound for pound. I'll keep Volk there at number 1.
So I have often felt very strongly about this point.
Yes.
And I've said it. You beat the guy, you take his spot, right?
Yeah.
You have to be above him, especially, and I still believe this, especially when you're in the same weight class. So I feel very strongly, Leon beats Kamaru, he is above him, wherever that may be. 6/7, 1/2, 5/6. You get the point. Carla Esparza beats Rose on the night. Like, you got to give it to Carla. I don't care what you think of Rose. That's the matchup. That's how we find out, especially for the main rankings, let alone the pound for pound. But as we said, everyone has their own interpretation of pound for pound. It's this fictitious, crazy thing. And it's amazing. I don't know, by the way, if the pound for pound debate has ever been more hotly debated than it is on this Monday. Because usually it's, Izzy, Pereira, it's Carl, like no one really cares. But because it was one guy moving up, fighting the other guy who they say is either 1 or 2, and it was so close, it's a fascinating discussion to have, as silly as it may be. Because I see Aspinall and all these people being like, this this dumb thing that nerds like to debate? Yes.
Yeah.
But this is what makes it fun. This is barbershop stuff. We love debating this shit. And so let me just say this. Going into the fight, I had it Alex, Leon, Islam. Coming out of the fight, I have 3 Leon, 2 Islam,
Oh my gosh.
You can't.
1 Alex.
You can't. That doesn't make sense.
I do.
I don't know how
it
you
defies your own
I
logic.
do. I'll
spent
explain to
all
you why
Sunday.
now.
I'll
I'll explain to you right now.
Before you explain, I spent all Sunday figuring out how you were going to do this.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to do this.
You know why?
It defies
Tell
your
me.
own logic.
It does. Because me and Rick were the ones arguing that Usman should still be ahead of
And he should.
of Leon Edwards.
Well, you guys don't even agree with me on that one.
Take the floor.
Here's why. Islam Makhachev on Saturday night won the contest. Alex Volkanovski won the fight. He won that fight. Islam won the contest.
We can't do that.
Dude, I'm allowed to do whatever the fuck I want. Islam won 3 out of 5 rounds. The guy who was standing the tallest at the end of the night, to me, and at the end of the day, pound for pound is who is the best fighter, all things equal, on the planet. Volkanovski won the fight. He won the contest. Now, I'm saying the guy won. Rightly. He has the belt. He should have the belt. I'm not saying there was any sort of robbery or controversy, but if I'm looking at a fictitious world where I can make up fictitious rules, the guy who I was more impressed with walking out of that cage on Saturday was Alex Volkanovski.
Feel exactly the same as you. Kamaru Usman, by your logic, is better than Leon Edwards, period.
No, because as I said, same weight class, they're all playing by the same set of cards. In this case, they're not. This is the smaller guy going up and fending off the bigger, badder dude. There's something to be said about that. There's absolutely something to be said about that. Usman versus Leon is the same weight class. They're on the same level.
So
this isn't the same level. There are weight classes for a reason. And that smaller guy defied the odds and won the freaking fight. Walked out of there healthier and in better shape physically and finished the fight, not the contest, the fight, in better shape than the other guy.
I can't go.
Remember
He
that
beat him. He beat him. He had the he
in the
gets the
contest.
win.
He beat him in the
Yeah,
contest.
Kamaru,
But he
And
will
then-
have the W
Kamaru
in the
Usman
win
lost
column. He
to
keeps
Leon
the belt.
Edwards. Right?
Yes. In a welterweight title fight between 2 welterweights. This was a lightweight title fight between 2 lightweight and a featherweight. This is what I feel.
Everything you said,
by the way,
I
this is
agree
what
with.
makes it fun. This is
Yeah.
what makes it great.
Everything you said, I agree with.
And I had
about
Leon
Alexander
too.
Volkanovski.
And so I'm bumping Islam up 1 spot. By the way, I still maintain this. I'm sorry. And everyone's going to hate. Again, I will preface this for anyone who's going to clip this off and call me a hater. I had him winning. I watched it again. I still have him winning. Okay? I have him winning. I think that it is insane that he was 2 going into this fight. Absolutely insane. Resume does matter. I'm sorry, but beating the Bobby Greens of the world doesn't make you number 2 pound for pound. And I'm sorry, he isn't as good as Khabib. He is not. He is not as good as Khabib. He is not. At this stage, 26 fights in, Khabib was more refined, dominant, better. He is not. That being said, he's one of the top 3 best fighters on the planet. So please be clear. I know we're not allowed to criticize Islam Makhachev. I know that's taboo.
Khabib Hive is coming.
I don't give a fuck. I'm saying he won the fight. I'm saying he won fair and square. I don't think it's a robbery. I'm being as unbiased as possible, but I'm also saying I believe we are putting the praise and all the stuff that we had on Khabib on his shoulders. We are taking the baton that Khabib had and giving it to him because we want to continue this lineage. It ain't the same. He's not the same guy right now. He may end up being the same. How do I know he's not the same guy? Khabib never got knocked out by the Adriano Martinez's of the world. All right, there's one thing that tells you he's not the same. Khabib was never put in a position like this on Saturday in the 5th round getting beat up. He's not the same guy.
But
he's not the same guy.
Can I say one thing to counter that?
Yeah.
Or devil's advocate. I'm not necessarily disagreeing. But if you're going to tell me that Alexander Volkanovski is number 1 and the best in the world, then that's why he's in that position. That's why Islam looked vulnerable. Because he's facing who you consider to be the best guy.
Yeah, he was also the best guy going in. He was also the best guy going in.
But Khabib didn't face that guy, right?
That's fair. He did face some pretty damn good guys. Dustin
But did he
Poirier,
face that
Justin
guy?
Gaethje. No.
So my counter to that is against that level of competition, against a guy as good as we all believe Alexander Volkanovski is, to not only win that fight, but hurt Alexander Volkanovski at times and have him in a compromised position in the 4th round, I think tells me that Islam is that good. My personal take, I think Islam is not as ferocious, not as aggressive a grappler would much rather get the position and kind of works from there. But as far as striking, man, I've got Islam ahead of Khabib. I've got Islam ahead of Khabib with the hands. Khabib has a really fast kind of striking, and he can catch you with some surprise shots every once in a while. But I would say overall, especially when it comes to the defensive striking, and some of the fundamentals, I've got Islam ahead there, and I think he really is, as he's the successor to Khabib. It's hard to say better, worse, but like I think he's up there.
Of course, but
I think he's up there.
I feel like we have put all that stuff, all those accolades on him because Khabib left. I don't feel like we will feel the same way or would have felt the same way if Khabib was still around. I will also say this, just to remind everyone, if everyone was playing by the same set of rules, same weight in this fictitious world that we're all weighing 155 or 170, whatever it is, I put his skill set over the current, well, there isn't a heavyweight champion, but who would have been
who are we talking about? Islam?
Islam, yeah.
Islam,
better than the heavyweight, better than the light heavyweight, better than the middleweight.
The second.
Yes. Okay, so there's no shame in that. He hasn't been tested as much. He went up there against the guy who I think is number one and had a tough time in a fight where people had him at what, like, you know, plus 400, something like that, or minus 400.
He was a giant favorite.
Yeah. So to me, I just left. If you all said that he was going to smoke him, you all said he was going to run right through him. He won 3 out of the 5, but the fight, I was just more impressed. Now, here's the question. All right, so there's the pound for pound thing, and that's what makes this fun. This is all fun, guys. Everyone, you take this way too seriously. We love the passion. We love everything. But again, this isn't a personal insult. But here's where it does get personal. This morning, Dan Hooker has thrown out a very, very, very serious accusation towards Islam. He has made it very clear. He's not dancing. He is saying that he used an IV before the fight. Just to let you know, that is illegal. Now, we can debate all we want. Should it just be legal? Like they used to be able to use this stuff all the time and rehydrate, and we want them at their healthiest. But there's questions. When did he do it? How many times did he do it? Did he do it before the weigh-ins, after the weigh-ins? There's a difference between the two. There's a lot there.
Did he do it at all?
Did he do it at all? Of course. So there are multiple questions that need to be answered. It's not Volk putting this out there. It's Dan Hooker, and that's it. But I think at this point, if we look at the history of the relationship between USADA and the UFC, ever since it was put in place, top of my head, 2015, accusation or not, people have to answer now to these accusations. Number one, USADA needs to figure this out. Like they know about it at this point.
Yeah.
Their reputation is at stake here. Let's be honest. There haven't been as many high profile, infraction suspensions in the last 3 years as there were in the first 3 years. I think we could all agree with that. We all remember it felt like every single week someone of high stature was being Jon Jones, Brock Lesnar, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't happen. Why? You could say maybe the fighters are getting smarter, or you could say they're not being as strict, or you could say they were like, we're losing out on millions of dollars here by these fights being canceled at the last minute. Like, we need to figure this out. Who knows? I feel personally like the relationship between the USADA organization and the UFC is a lot cozier than it should be. If it's truly independent, the UFC can't be paying them. It can't. I mean, that's a conflict in its own right. People need to answer for this. Honestly, he put it out there. Dan Hooker should answer for this. USADA needs to answer about this. The UFC should probably, this is a massive accusation. This is a massive accusation that he's levying. The fact that it is out there, and if it is proven to be true, and I have no idea, and I'm not going to speculate, I'm not going to go into this rabbit hole, that would be extremely irresponsible of us. But this just adds another layer, if there is a shred of doubt involved in all of this, that maybe they need to run it back. I don't know how I felt about it on Saturday. I felt like, okay, this was a moment in time. It was historic, but there are 2 divisions that need to move on. But then you start to think about those 2 divisions, and you start to think about the fact that the supposed number 1 lightweight contender fight is happening in May. That's in 3 months. And then the featherweight champion just won. And then you've got this Arnold Allen fight, which I feel like he should be in the mix. That's happening in April. Maybe they do have enough time to run it back. I don't know if they go to Australia, this, that, or the other. But let me ask you guys how you feel about all this, because I need answers now. People need to answer to this. And if there is some truth to this, we're talking at best, an immediate rematch. At worst, we're talking a potential suspension, which would be catastrophic.
I'll say this. I agree that we need some answers, but I will say the onus, in my opinion, is on Dan Hooker first, right? Dan Hooker's levying these accusations. I don't think anybody needs to respond to it until Dan Hooker shows some evidence. If Dan Hooker is just saying it, that's not enough.
It's very dangerous.
That's not enough for me. I need to see something before I will hold USADA's feet to the fire, before I will hold Islam's feet to the fire. Now, if he's able to show something, now I need more answers from everybody else. But until that point, or even if it's not Dan Hooker, if something else comes out to support this claim, that's when I think we need answers. Until then, it's on Dan Hooker.
Don't hate the idea of USADA saying, like, look, our integrity is being
maybe
questioned.
Like a response.
I mean, it's a big freaking deal to say this.
Dan Hooker is not insinuating anything. Like, he is like going
flatly
straight for the jugular. I mean, just looking over the tweets, like the first one sent out, calling him a cheating dog, using an IV. Then he calls out USADA themselves. Then he says, prove me wrong. I mean, honestly, he needs to prove himself with some evidence. But like, blatantly calls Islam a cheater. Says if he doesn't cheat, he doesn't win. Like.
It's super damning. It's super damning. We don't know where he was when he's tweeting this. I don't know if it's not really the middle of the night or anything like that. But look, we've known Dan Hooker to be a straight shooter. We've known him to be a guy who's not out to try to like troll or, like we see guys, you see people do things and be like, haha, I was just joking. Like, this doesn't seem like it's a joke.
I mean, he fought Islam himself. So like, why come out now? Unless he says he saw something or knows something this time.
So actually, Damon Martin just dropped into our channel that they asked USADA for a response. Damon Martin of MMA Fighting. USADA takes all reports of possible violations seriously, and we actively follow up on all information we receive. Under the UFC prohibited list, all IV infusions and or injections of more than 100 milliliters per 12-hour period are prohibited at all times, except for those legitimately received in the course of hospital admissions, surgical procedures, or clinical diagnostic investigations, and or those received in competition or out of competition that are determined to be medically justified and within the standard of care by a licensed physician and administered by a licensed medical professional without an approved therapeutic use exemption. It is if a prohibited substance of any amount is administered intravenously by infusion or injection, a TUE is required for this prohibited substance, regardless of the volume of the infusion or injection or the circumstances of administration. So a lot of technical jargon there, but essentially saying that this is banned and continues to be banned if subject to these specific limits in a 12-hour period.
Sure. I mean, we could have gone in that beforehand. Obviously, they have to be careful about what they say, but you hope that this is being looked at. Now, by the way, if it's looked at and they find out that it's total BS, like that needs to be said. They need to clear themselves, because right now there's a spotlight on USADA, right? Right now there has been, rightly or wrongly, some controversy, shred of doubt, something has been thrown out there. So either, clear it up, or say we're looking into it, or say we don't, want to comment, something, because that's a big freaking deal. That is a big freaking deal. Now, again, we can have the discussion about whether or not IV should be used regardless, right? They took this away. Like they took the sponsors away, like they took a lot of stuff away. A lot of guys used to IV it up after a weigh-in and would help them rehydrate, and it would make them as healthy as possible. I don't know enough about the science about why that is considered a PED not, and I don't know what's the difference between doing it beforehand and doing it after. I don't know. I'm not smart enough for any of that. But this is a really serious accusation. And so the question is, as we sit here right now on a Monday at 1:45 p.m. Eastern time, is all of this, how closely the fight was scored, the pound for pound stuff, this new Dan Hooker thing, right this second, is all of this enough to make you say, gosh darn it, we got to run it back. Hook it up for May, hook it up for June, hook it up for International Fight Week, let's run it back? Or do you say, look, this was a nice moment, it was in Australia, but the divisions need to roll on. We've got an interim champ that needs, to unify the belts. We've got a number one contender. What do you say? GC, you go.
I lean that way, the latter there. I thought it was a great fight. I thought everything surrounding it was fantastic. I mean, it's great for the sport, all the discussion surrounding the decision. Seeing two of the best perform at that level was incredible. But I do think with the way that Yair Rodriguez performed on Saturday night, I think he's deserved of the title shot in the featherweight division. And I think that needs to be against Alexander Volkanovski. And then you have the title eliminator with Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush coming up in May, and the winner of that gets Islam. I don't think Islam is looking to do a quick turnaround and fight someone outside of his division again. And I think they'll both fight in their respective divisions for the next fight.
What do you think, Rick?
Let me just break in with one thing.
Sure.
First part of what USADA said. USADA takes all reports of possible violations seriously, and we actively follow up on all information we receive. That's pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
If Dan Hooker has some information, instead of Twitter, USADA should be the one receiving this information. If Alexander Volkanovski's team has some kind of information, USADA should be the one receiving.
And you hope by this being put out there that is, I mean, obviously it would have been better probably for all involved if it was just brought to them privately.
Yeah.
But this feels like enough.
Yeah.
It also
I want to know.
Yeah.
This feels more difficult for USADA to disprove it than it would be for Dan Hooker to just prove
They
it
need to
to
prove
them. Like, I mean, how do you disprove that he didn't get an IV test?
Right.
3 days later.
I don't know. I have no idea.
I don't know if you could do that. So it feels like it's on Dan Hooker to provide them with the evidence.
The onus is on that side, for sure. But to your point, I want to see USADA take this seriously and figure out if there's something here, if they have a reason to, if there's evidence.
Right.
Got to be
Because
taken
this is
seriously.
serious. This, again, like you mentioned up top. Do we care if fighters have IVs or not? Personally, I don't. My position, and I've said it a few times, like I say they all cheat, whatever. I don't even care. But this is prohibited by the rules, and I would care about the rules being broken. I don't care if you get caught breaking the rules. That's what I care about. To return to the question that you asked now, I would have rather, before this news, I would have rather seen them return to their divisions. If I'm being honest, as great as that fight was, I would have rather seen them return to their divisions. If it comes out that there was an unfair advantage,
Oh, that changes everything.
that changes things for me.
Sure.
Yeah, run it back for sure.
I would want to see that fight again.
But honestly, if there was an unfair advantage, meaning something, illegal happened, he's getting suspended.
yeah, and that's the
yeah.
other part of it. If
No contest,
depending on the
too.
punishment.
I mean, that would be just
So
absolutely insane.
that changes a lot. If we rewind to a world where this is not a subject of conversation, I would rather them defend their titles in their respective weight classes. I love the fight. I'd rather see it down the line than immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, Yair deserves this now. Like I said, we have seen instances in the past where,
Yeah.
the interim champion is actually defending it. I do think the timing of that lightweight fight is a little bit weird. Like, why? By the way, let me get all up in arms in favor of another guy that people say I don't back enough, Beneil Dariush. Why is Beneil Dariush fighting Charles Oliveira?
Yeah, man.
Why is that fight happening?
It's a good question.
I mean,
That's a
all he
great
had to do
question.
was wait till Saturday, and he's the number one contender. Why is this fight happening? And by the way, what a mess of a situation if Charles wins. Do we really want Charles versus Islam too?
I don't hate that. I don't hate
It was
Charles
too
versus Islam.
one-sided. It was too one-sided. I don't. Who cares to see that again? You're telling me? I mean, I'd much rather see Volk versus Islam.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would rather see Volk as
In a vacuum, sure, but the problem here is Volk's title. That's the problem. Isn't the fight itself?
Oh, I get that. I just don't understand why Beneil even has to do another fight.
I'm baffled by that.
I mean, he called for 10 fights after.
I'm baffled by that. Beneil Dariush is a rightful number one contender, and I think he poses a lot of stylistic problems for Islam Makhachev. I think he deserves that fight, but I will say I wouldn't have a problem with Charles getting another crack if he wins that fight because of how highly I rate.
Well, if he
Beneil.
smokes Beneil, I guess, but he shouldn't
Yeah.
even be put in that position, to be honest. Like
Beneil shouldn't.
the timing is
Yeah.
perfect here. Like
Beneil should be the number one contender, no doubt. I agree 100%.
They've got a superstar in Charles, though. Like, it would not hurt to have him go for the lightweight.
it's just I kind of feel bad for Beneil that he even has to do. It's sort of in line with like Arnold and
Yeah,
Max.
for
You
sure.
know what I mean? It's like,
When you're
damn,
on this
he's gonna beat
giant
this dude.
winning streak.
Yeah.
But we see this from time to time with certain fighters for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Bilal Muhammad, even
Yeah.
Leon. Like, how hard did he have to scrape and claw to get that title fight? I see it. This is what's happening to Beneil. Beneil just has to work a little bit harder and a little bit harder, and it's a damn shame because I think he's really freaking good. He's in his prime right now, and it'll be a great fight. But look, Charles has the cachet, man. Charles
Yes.
has a star.
Superstar.
I will say
wherever he
this
goes.
after Saturday night, despite how close it was, but I scored it and I was like, all right, 48-47, super close, super fun, loved everything about it. I mean, man, if there's a fight that's better than this one throughout this year, and this doesn't end up being the fight of the year, like, fuck, we're in store for a great year, right?
I was going to say, that's
Yeah.
a great
So
year, man.
this is great. Let's just give the award to the guys right now. I didn't think I would sit here and say, like, man, I need that immediate rematch. Because again, like, the double champ stuff is a little bit messy. It holds up divisions. As I've said, I don't usually campaign for this sort of thing. But, the timing was okay here, and it was Australia, and there was no clear-cut contender, blah, 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 blah. And I feel the same on this Monday, to be honest. I feel the same. However, if there is something, shady, if there was something illegal, now it changes. But again, it gets weird because there's a suspension potentially involved, blah, 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 who knows. But I'm just saying, if the suspension is, well, I'm sorry, man, you got to run it back. You got to go back to Australia and do this again. Then, honestly, I don't even hate that.
Yeah.
I don't even hate that.
If we're really playing this out, right, in a theoretical world, I'm going to again stop down here and say there is no evidence presented at this moment that we're speaking right now. It's important to say that Islam Makhachev has not been proven to have done anything, period. Nothing. At this moment, right now.
Yeah.
If for some reason something did happen, I would be okay with Alexander Volkanovski getting another crack at the lightweight belt, even if it's not against.
I was going to say,
Volk
even if
versus
it's not
Beneil?
against Islam.
the winner of Beneil,
Why not?
Charles Oliveira,
Yo,
Volk gets that.
if that's what
lightweight.
Volk
Now-
versus Beneil or Volk versus Charles would be fucking nuts.
If that's what he wants.
Yeah, I know.
If he wants another crack at lightweight, I would be 100% willing to give it to him.
We're really getting ahead of ourselves here, though.
But if not, if everything is kosher, simpatico, I'm good just moving on from this. It was a great fight. Maybe do it again in a few fights. There's other contenders to take on. We just talked about how long Beneil's waiting. They do it again, now he's waiting even longer and longer and longer, and it just needs to move.
And does our boy Arnold Allen wait even longer and longer, too?
Yeah, I mean, look, Arnold's in a big spot here, April 15th in Kansas City, of all places. We got the Hawaiian against Englishman in Kansas City. Shout out to the great fans
barbecue
over there. Yeah. I mean, he has to win that fight. And then honestly, and I think he would be the first to say this, and he's coming up in 7 minutes, has to prove to the UFC brass that, he can fight 2-3 times a year, right? I think that, or at least 2 times a year. It's been a while since he fought twice, so I think they need to believe that as well. But this is a really interesting spot that the UFC is in. It's really fascinating. I think the part that I love the most, if I'm being honest, is just the fact that I see all this love for Volk now. For like one of the guys who wasn't quite DC level, but there was a part of me that was like, man, this guy, like, why can't people see that he is someone that you want to root for? Right? He's like cut from that same, for me, he's cut from that same like Katie Taylor cloth. It was like, as I get older, I feel like I'm drawn to these people as opposed to the bad boys or, the trash talkers, which I always love and appreciate. But this is the kind of guy, like, this is salt of the earth kind of guy. This is the kind of guy that you want being the face of your organization.
Mention.
Absolutely. And so it is nice. And the first Max thing, kind of like the first one was a little bit close. The second one was super close. So I think by that, like, remember all the hate he got after the second Max fight? Well, now it's just nice to see him getting his flowers, despite the fact that he didn't get the belt that he wanted so badly.
100%. But that's why, right? He's beating, he beat a fan favorite in Max Holloway 3 times. That doesn't help you. That doesn't help. I'm talking about in court of public opinion and in the fan sentiment. It doesn't help to beat a guy like Max because that's their favorite. And it hurts their feelings. And Islam has a very, very loud and strong and vocal fan base, and it doesn't help to say Alexander Volkanovski is number 1 pound for pound because that hurts it too. It's a hard balancing act, but I do think ultimately him getting his flowers is deserved and will continue to happen. And I think this fight will change that trajectory a little bit. The one thing I'll push back against is he himself has pushed the narrative about the haters. I just don't think they were there. I don't think people were ready to jump on board and love him, but I don't think he had these haters that he was making up, and I could see that rubbing people the wrong way.
I think that's revisionist history. I think you're getting caught up in something, and I see people trying to shake shots at him for that. You don't remember clearly the hate that this guy received after Fight Island.
That's every fighter.
No, man, he 100%. Got a lot of shit after Fight Island. He got a lot of shit. I remember talking to him about it.
Max Holloway.
They loved him, and they felt like he was I remember it. I remember doing an interview with Volk. Afterwards, he's on the side of the road, and we're talking about all the shit that he's receiving for what? For fighting. He didn't score the fight. And remember, he kept that news about them waking, USADA again, waking him up in the morning and all this stuff. Like, he kept that back pocket until the third fight. Point is, That guy has lived it. He has read the comments. He has seen, like we don't live it. He lives it. And so if he feels like the world is out to get him, or if he feels like no one believes in him, or he's got this chip, who are we to say that that's not a real thing? I hate when we do that.
Also, people getting frustrated with him saying he was the underdog, people doubting him last week. It's because that was true. He was a massive underdog and everyone was doubting him. I was told all last week, Islam Makhachev inside the distance, -110. It's free money. It's the easiest bet of the week. That's just free money. It was not. And like people were doubting this man. Not many people gave him a real chance last week.
I still can't quite get there.
You did not give him that much of a chance, Rick. You were shocked as that fight was going on.
There's a difference between picking against somebody and doubting or hating. To say that he was at a disadvantage in a fight with Islam Makhachev, I'm sorry, that's not hating.
You're doubting him, though. You're doubting him.
Sure.
And that's all he's saying. He's like, y'all are doubting me.
But is he doubted more than any other fighter? I just don't believe it to be true. I just don't. I respect him. He's my number one pound for pound. I don't love the everybody doubted me. From his perspective, it's great. Motivate yourself. It's the bulletin board. Do it. I think it's smart. I just don't think it's real. I don't think Sean O'Malley is like, oh, these haters, they're hating on me. Jeez, and it makes that his sole narrative. It's just not real. It's not a thing.
And here's the biggest question. Come March 6th, when we're sitting here, is this all a moot point after Jon Jones?
I think it's all a moot point because UFC is going to release the rankings sometime this week, and Islam's going to be number one.
No, you get what I'm saying? If Jon
Jones is going to be one.
Is he back?
If he goes out there and smokes Ciryl Gane, there is no doubt in my mind that he's going to be number one.
What a fucking time, by the way, that we get that after this. But after
and then 2 weeks later we get Leon Usman 3, and then 2 weeks after that we get Izzy Pereira. Oh my gosh!
And game bred boxing in the midst of all that.
Now we're talking. Now we're talking.
By the way,
Arnold Allen the week after Izzy Pereira.
It's a stretch unlike any other.
You asked about the last time like this pound for pound conversation was hot. It was when it was Khabib versus Jon. That was the last time I remember it being like. I think Jon Jones like actually got offended by the idea that people were ranking Khabib at the time. So it would be interesting to have Jon Jones right back in that conversation against Khabib's protege. Being able to potentially steal that spot would be massive.
And it's just so perfect for the UFC because you can't get a definitive answer. It's like what we said earlier.
It's the best.
Everybody has their own definitions of what it means. Everybody has their own opinions. It's the MJ versus LeBron. You can just argue and argue and argue until you're blue in the face.
By the way, we're blessed that we even have this debate on our hands right now, right?
Amazing.
Like sometimes it's just boring, clear cut, but the fact that they're kind of in the same orbit, right? 45, 55. Right now in boxing, like you have Crawford, you have Spence, but there's Fury. They're never going to fight each other. You have Inoue. They're never going to fight each other. So like we're actually lucky that we have two guys that are in, even Leon 1-7. This is great. I love this shit. Can't get enough of it. But for the record, as far as the official MMA Hour pound for pound rankings are concerned, Volk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
just completely going against your rules.
Volk, Leon, Islam.
Yeah, just contradicting yourself all over the place. But
contradicting yourself, just like.
Wait a minute. No,
I knew you were going to do it too.
Wait a minute.
I spent all Sunday.
You said Islam too.
Yeah.
Earlier.
I just wanted to see if you were paying attention.
Okay.
I'm gonna. Look, when people used to go on YouTube and write like Diaz 135.
Yeah. I think it was 125.
Oh, whatever.
I mean, it's always these close fights. It's always, the 3 rounds that's just going to become everywhere on Twitter.
You don't have to push me too hard to rank Jon Jones number one pound for pound. Just show me something, Johnny.
That's when the real war starts. Jon Jones, Ciryl Gane. I'm Team Gane. Rick's Team
I actually
Jones.
was waiting for you at some point to be like, yeah, this is a moot point because Jon Jones is going to win in 18 days. And
he needs to actually win. See, there is something to the resume part of it, but it's not all of it for me.
If he wins a close decision, is that enough?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask.
I'm asking you.
If Islam is number one for most people, I mean, that was a close decision. Is Jon Jones not worthy going up to heavyweight?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm asking you because I know you're a big fan.
I have to see the fight. I have to see the fight. But man, you don't have to push me too hard. I would slide Jon Jones right back in there very easily if he shows me anything against the top heavyweight right now.
What a time.
Left.
March 6th is only 3 weeks away, too.